Alexa, stop.
Belkis, can you mute yourself, please?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. The webinar will begin shortly. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on this cold and rainy Tuesday. We're so glad that you're here with us. Get my slide to advance for me. All right, great. So we're excited to have the last of our series of special education webinars here today, covering transition services, that topic that we all know is a big scary topic, and that there are lots of questions and issues that come about when our child or student is approaching transition. My name is Lisa Turner, and I'm the Executive Director of the ARC of Oklahoma. formerly TARC. I joined the ARC of Oklahoma about 2 years ago after a 20-year history of working in the nonprofit field, specifically in the fields of development and program development and management. I am a mother of 2 daughters, a 19-year-old who is in transition herself right now from high school. She has multiple disabilities, including autism, and a soon-to-be 16-year-old daughter that gives me her own challenges herself. So my passion is really fueled by the experiences that I have had as a mother, and wanting to ensure that all Oklahomans with intellectual and developmental disabilities have access to the services and supports that they need to live their best life. A couple of housekeeping items before we begin. This webinar will be recorded, and you can use the question and answers feature to ask questions throughout the webinar. We'll address those at the end of the presentation. We anticipate many questions and know that you might have some that come up after the webinar. So you're more than welcome to email those questions if we don't get them addressed today to Sherilyn Walton at swalton@thearcok.org. This, as I said, this is the last webinar in our series on special education, but we are planning to cover the Oklahoma Stable accounts in December. So please follow our Facebook page for additional information. You may have noticed that I mentioned that we are now the ARC of Oklahoma, formerly TARC. We're very excited to make the official transition over to the ARC of Oklahoma, dropping the TARC name on November the 2nd, next week. We are now the state chapter for Oklahoma the state chapter of the ARC of the United States, which is the largest national community-based organization advocating for and with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. While our name and look are changing, we're still offering the same services to Oklahomans with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families that we always have, and we'll continue to serve people across their diagnosis and across all ages through their lifespan. One of the programs that's staying the same and is one of our most popular and busiest programs is our Family Support Services, which many of you are aware of and have worked with both Sherilyn Walton, our Hannah Chaboy from that department. So we provide resource navigation and one-on-one educational support and advocacy, as well as representation at IEP meetings. So the program is led by Sherilyn Walton, a licensed clinical social worker and former special education and general education, who has been with the ARC of Oklahoma for 24 years. We also are proud to have Hannah Chaboy as our bilingual resource navigator, who also offers IEP support in Spanish and hosts our Spanish support groups, as well as resource navigation for the Hispanic population. So now I'm pleased to introduce you to one of 2 co-presenters today, Dr. Kendra Williams-Diem, a professor in the special education program in the Department of Educational Psychology. Her primary research interests include comprehensive transition services with a focus on self-determination and post-secondary outcomes for students with disabilities, specifically intellectual and developmental disabilities. A secondary research interest focuses on the role culture and family plays in both the education of and outcomes for students with diverse backgrounds. Dr. Williams-Diem also actively teaches both undergraduate and graduate students in the Educational Psychology Department, especially in teacher preparation programs. Prior to coming to the University of Oklahoma, Dr. Williams-Diem was at the Beach Center on Disability at the University of Kansas. Joining her will be Belkis Choisel-Praslin, say that 5 times, a 4th-year doctoral candidate at the University of Oklahoma, focusing on special education transition and applied behavior analysis. Previously, she taught all academic and elective subjects to 11th and 12th grade students with mild and moderate disabilities, and was a coordinator teacher for severe profound students with disabilities in Washington, D.C. public schools. Her primary research interests include teacher preparation in transition education and language validation of transition assessments. We want to thank both of you for joining us today. And if you'll give me just a moment, Dr. Williams Dean, I will give you control of the presentation.
Thank you to everyone. Belkis and I are both delighted to be here and get to talk on a subject that we are both pretty passionate about. So I had the opportunity before the webinar began to kind of get a feel for who all is in attendance today. And it looks like there's a lot of people from a lot of different places. Looks like there's some people from the school system, from the State Board of Education, also a lot of families. And we are more than happy to present this information. It is my understanding that if you have questions, please do use the Q&A feature of Zoom. And we want to make sure that we get all of those questions answered. Belkis and I are both pretty informal when we present. And so please, I don't know if the feature to raise your hand or anything is enabled right now on Zoom, but please let us know your questions. And we are here to help. So I am going to share my screen. Oh wait, I still can't share screen, Lisa.
Okay, I made you the host, so.
I think you made me the host.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, just a moment. So Belkis, you'll have to turn over control then back to me.
Oh wait, okay, I think I've got it now. It's letting me. Did you make me the host, Belkis?
Okay,
all right.
There we go.
Okay.
The fun of Zoom. Thank you all for your patience.
Okay, wait a minute. Now I have to slideshow from the beginning. Okay. So as I said, Belkis and I are more than happy to present on this subject. We're both pretty passionate about it. And what we're really trying to do today is provide a very general overview of what transition is and kind of that really basic knowledge set that we all need to have, whether it's to help our child or family members successfully through the transition process, whether we are an educator and we are trying to help our students in our classroom through the process, or whether we're an advocate and we're trying to support others. And so we're really just trying to provide basic knowledge as to what are the legal requirements, and then how can we make sure that we are doing this effectively. So most of the resources that we are going to talk about today are available on the Zero Center website. I highly encourage all of you, if you have not had an opportunity to go to the Zero Center website, please do check it out. There is a lot of resources, especially for educators, to teach transition and teach self-determination skills in the classroom, as well as for family members. So please do check that out. We are also available on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And so please do follow us on those social media outlets if that is something you're interested in. So, all right. So today we're going to briefly go over, and I think we have like 40 minutes to go over a bunch of stuff, but we're gonna make it. Basically, what are the foundations of transition? How does transition assessment play into such a critical part of that transition piece? And then definitely make you aware of some professional development opportunities that are available to you for free within the state. So first, let's jump right in and let's talk about the foundations of transition. So I'm not sure if this is a possibility in the Q&A feature, but what is the purpose of special education? When you think of what is special education as defined by IDEA 2004, which although I know the government has said for the last 15, 16 years, they're going to get around to reauthorizing it, but we are still under the IDEA reauthorization of 2004. What is the purpose? And so a lot of the things, if we were in a room and we could all talk about this, we hear FAPE a lot. The purpose is FAPE. The purpose is to provide an education, to provide an appropriate education. And these are all great answers. So when we really get into what is the purpose of special education, what was the whole IDEA legislation written? It is to provide, yes, a free, appropriate public education that provides special education and related services that are unique to that student. But then we get to this part, which I think is so powerful. It's to prepare them for further education, further employment, and independent living. When we get to the heart of IDEA, it is transition, because it's all about, yes, providing FAPE, providing this free, appropriate education, but it's for the purpose of further education, employment, and independent living. And so everything that we should be doing in the school district or in public schools, private schools, whatever the K-12 system, should be getting our students to these three huge pillars of education, employment, and independent living. And so a lot of times when we get into those secondary special education years, and especially for students who have more developmental disabilities, we really have to ask ourselves, what is the benefit of this? And is this helping to transition and move this individual to further education, employment, and independent living? So usually I poll my graduate students on this, and it's something that if anyone has ever had me in class, I talk about a lot, but transition is the purpose of IDEA. And if we're not preparing our students for life after high school, then we're really just not preparing them appropriately. So a little bit of history, because it's me and I like talking about it. It's interesting because Lisa brought it up. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to, I'm going the wrong way. Before all the people came on, is this is really a social justice issue. When you think about the history of individuals with intellectual disabilities and where we were 50, 60 years ago, we have come a long way, but we're not to the finish line yet. So a lot of times in the very late 60s and in the 70s, when a lot of civil rights movements started coming about, that's when family members started saying, whoa, my child with a disability is not getting the same opportunities as children without disabilities. And my child is an equal participant in life. They are a full, they're an individual and they deserve these abilities and these opportunities. So we really started seeing in the 70s, students were now given the opportunity to go to school. And it became, of course, in 1975 with the Education of Handicapped Children's Act, it was now the first time schools couldn't turn away kids because they had disabilities. So great, one step forward. Then in the 1980s, we really started realizing that students with disabilities are not achieving the same outcomes, not achieving same education outcomes, not achieving the same employment outcomes. And so all of this started to evolve. Finally, when IDEA, the first authorization of the Individuals with Education Act, was written in 1990, transition became part of the legislation. And this was really a big deal, because now school districts were forced to consider transition. If you think about students who were in the school system before 1990, transition wasn't something they had to think about. But all of a sudden, starting in 1990, it's a requirement. We were reauthorized in 1997, transition went a little bit further, reauthorized in 2004, transition again, went a little bit further. And we're making progress. And so when I like to look back at this and think, transition has been mandated by law for 30 years now. 30 years it has been mandated, but we're still not there. We're still not to where students with disabilities, and especially students with more intellectual and developmental disabilities, have that equal footing as all other students. But we're getting there, baby steps forward, and organizations like the ARC are so amazing, because the reason we've made steps forward is because of the advocacy and the family members who have pushed it forward. So what does IDEA even say about transition? All right, there's three principles. Transition is results oriented. That means that we want to make sure that transition results in a product of the student getting further along. So We can put on a piece of paper that Johnny will go to post-secondary education, but this is just words on a piece of paper unless the results of Johnny going on to post-secondary education happen. We can write that Johnny's going to get a job, but what are we going to do to make sure that Johnny gets a job? And so it's all about the results that happen as a result of that transition plan. It is also student-centered. That individual student has to stay the focus of the transition plan. 5 different students, 5 very different transition plans, because each student has their own unique strengths, their own unique areas of need, their own unique supports going into that transition plan. And without maintaining the student as the very, very center of that plan, we're not going to write a transition plan that's appropriate for them. And it's also coordinated activities. It's a coordinated effort. Not any one entity is going to be able to provide all the services that individuals need to be successful after they transition. It's going to take the school district. It's going to take families. Oh my goodness, families are like this critical piece to everything. It's going to take adult agencies and support, whether it's the DD support, whether it's voc rehab, whether it's advocacy organizations like the ARC. That coordinated effort that goes into transition planning is critical. So please remember that there's these 3 critical components of transition services in terms of being results oriented, being student centered, and having to have that coordinated effort. Belkis, if you want to join in, feel free.
The only thing I have to add is that for the coordinated effort portion, I think we see so many plans that everything is up to the teacher and everything is on the teacher's behalf, and they're going to monitor every single goal and they're going to do everything for the student. We want our teachers to be able to move away from that model because it's the student's goal. So they should be monitoring as much as they can, but it's also, it has an impact on the family. It has an impact on the VR coordinator. So everyone should be in some way, shape, or form kind of have a hand in these goals and transition plan. So it's not just for the teachers, it's for everyone. That's a big thing I try to say to everyone.
All right, so transition age has been kind of an interesting process. When IDEA was originally written in 2016, or excuse me, in 1990, the transition age was 16. Then we had these 97 reauthorizations that made this statement of need by 14 and transition plans by 16. And it's kind of been this evolving, you know, back and forth age ping pong. Current IDEA transition age, the federal mandate is it has to be in place before the child is 16. Now we are going to address the Oklahoma standard in the next slide. So remember, this is the federal mandate that it has to be in place by age 16. Most states, all US territories, I want to say it's 56% actually require transition to occur prior to the federal mandate, the earliest of which is 12, which I'm actually a huge advocate for starting early, because we're not going to get where we need to go if we wait till students are 16. That's after they have high school plans. That's after they've started high school and all of these other things. So starting early is always recommended. So many states do require the transition begins earlier, and transition planning is going to take that team effort, kind of as Belkis helped to address on the previous slide. That team effort and that coordinated group going into it is really going to help address all these components. Now, some states, and Oklahoma is one of them, is moving to require a transition process for all students. So Oklahoma has implemented the ICAPS procedure. I'm kind of a little bit excited. My oldest is now in high school, and I was a high school teacher, and I think high school students are really cool people. And so I keep asking her if she's done any of this stuff yet. And she keeps telling me, Mom, leave me alone. You're not my teacher, but I keep asking her anyway. So I'm so curious to see what this is looking like for all students. But I am really excited that Oklahoma has made a step forward into requiring all students to go through some sort of transition process. So I mentioned that the federal mandate is 16. Oklahoma is one of those 56% of states and territories that has required this earlier than 16. So for students in Oklahoma, you have to have a transition plan by the time you begin ninth grade or by the time you turn 16. And so most students are putting together their transition plan when they are in 8th grade. A few students may be putting it together a little bit earlier because of whatever reasons they are 16 and may still be in the middle school setting. But most students are going to put together their first transition plan when they are in 8th grade, give or take, maybe 7th grade, or whatnot due to age. So what this means, and this is one of the biggest questions we get, and also one of the biggest things we hear is transition is a high school issue. Absolutely not. Students are building their first transition plan when they are in middle school. So there's no way transition is a high school issue when they are putting together these transition plans while they're still in middle school. Now, I know that schools are doing everything they can to make sure that they stay compliant, and school districts have a lot of different processes to how they put together these initial transition plans. I've seen it where high school teachers come to middle schools to help set up these initial plans. My big thing is, especially when talking to family members and parents, is it is your responsibility and one of your responsibilities as the parent and guardian of that child to make sure that initial transition plan gets put together well. A lot of times when high school students come down to the middle school to complete transition plans, they may be completing them on students they are not as familiar with. Or if middle school teachers are putting transition plans together and the district kind of has a mindset that transition is a high school issue, middle school teachers may not have all the information that they need to put together really good transition plans. I am teaching transition assessment this semester in my graduate class. And one thing I often say is a compliant transition plan does not equal a good transition plan. And so there's things that school districts can do to make sure that they have met all of their compliance issues, but it doesn't mean that that transition plan is as good as it can be. And that's where it really falls down to parents and guardians of those students. The more you know, the more you can help make sure that your child has a really good transition plan that is more than just compliance. So total kudos to Oklahoma because you have gone beyond what the federal mandate requires for transition planning. So I'm going to kind of get through a little of the statistics quickly. Transition planning, we talked about it being like the heart of IDEA and the heart of, really what we're trying to get students to do is be independent, have jobs, work in the community, go to post-secondary education, and be a full integrated part of that community that you live in. And unfortunately, students with disabilities are often not included in that community at the same rate as individuals without disabilities. However, what we've learned is that when students have good transition plans, and when those transition plans are incorporated well, students have higher rate of post-secondary education. They have higher rate employment. They have higher earnings, higher living in the community, and all of these little benchmarks or indicators of successful transition happen. And so transition really is one of those areas that, if done well, is going to relate or going to translate into a higher community engagement and a higher quality of life once we finish high school. So here's just another statistic, and this is from a big national transition survey that was completed, but individuals with disabilities are less likely to have all of these adult outcomes, employment outcomes, without good transition planning. So we really need to make sure that good transition planning occurs so that our students have positive outcomes. We also know that about a quarter of our adults with disabilities are living below the poverty line. So again, when we have good transition planning, we are able to make sure that all of our individuals with adults are having successful lives and have the income that they need to have self-sustaining lives. All right. So Belkis did a great job on this. And so we always like to throw in some things. Most of the people we talk to are educators, but we also know most of you today are not an educator. And so what can you do if you're not the special educator or in a district? Great. We're expecting a lot of you today to be parents and guardians and other advocates. Transition services is a team effort. One thing, right now at the Zero Center, we are working on a new transition assessment specifically for students with developmental disabilities, intellectual disabilities. A lot of the questions and a lot of the suggested goals and outcome are not about the student, they're about the family, and they're about others working with the individual. And so knowing that it is a team effort and that every person in that team is critical helps ensure a successful transition outcome. We're also going to point out some ways that especially adult agencies such as Voc Rehab and DRS can get involved with the transition process, because DD Council, Voc Rehab, these are keys to helping our students have a successful transition process. All right, WIOA is another really good opportunity. So WIOA is the Workforce Investment Opportunities Act. With the reauthorization in 2015, it provided pre-ETS funds. These pre-ETS funds are funneling back into high school settings. So we really encourage you to find out how your districts are taking advantage of these pre-ETS funds, because students are eligible to receive additional assistance with employment during high school, especially students with developmental and intellectual disabilities. So please go and check out how your community and how your schools are working with WIOA and pre-ETS funds, so that you can make sure that your child or the children that you're working with, your students, are getting access to all of these funds. All right, now I get to be quiet for a little bit.
So we're going to look at transition planning. We have the foundations pretty much set now. And when we're looking at foundation planning itself, we have to start with transition assessments. And thank you. Our recommendations for best practice, and this is all research-based from what we know, that we should be using in schools at least 2, so multiple, age-appropriate transition assessments for every single student. And they should be, just like the rest of the IEP, individualized to that student's needs and to that student's test-taking preferences and abilities at the time. So the purpose of them is so we can monitor progress towards transition goals. You can think of it kind of a cycle. We give a student transition assessment, we're able to create goals based off our assessment results, and then we're able to work towards those goals with the student, help them meet their goals, and kind of do that process over and over and over again until they graduate. It seems maybe a little repetitive, but it's also what we know very important to a student's success. It helps us plan for not only their success, but their involvement in their own success. Thank you. I love the Fluff scale that you guys see here. It's a very informal way of thinking about it. Well, you can't see my arrow, but if you look towards the right of your screen where they have the biggest part of the Fluff scale, we start to see that match is not as important for students. And what that means is connecting students to their post-secondary goals is maybe not so important when they're younger, because we're trying to get students to explore all their options. And this is something that happens really naturally for a lot of students. They start as early as elementary school with career days, and they start seeing, learning about college because their families or their parents or like in our case, if you live in Norman or in Tulsa, you'll see that there's a college nearby and everybody's all about it. And that's wonderful. Exploration starts really young. And so for students, when they're really little, to tell you that they want to be a ballerina, a neurosurgeon, the world's best lawyer, is great. Matching their specific job careers when they're little is not a big deal. It starts to become a bigger deal once we're looking at the high school years and students are still telling you that they have these big fluffy goal dreams, but they haven't made any moves toward them. And so if I have a sophomore student who wants to be the world's first lawyer, doctor, surgeon, that's great. But if he hates math and science and doesn't even like to read, it's like, well, maybe lawyer, doctor, surgeon is not the right career path for you. Maybe we need to narrow, well, we do need to narrow these things down. The same goes for students who want to be professional football players. If they hate sports and they're not on a team, and what they really like is watching football, and maybe that's a different way that we can gauge their interest, but that doesn't mean that that match or what they're saying they want to do is actually going to be a great match for them. It's really hard as educators and as parents that we have to sometimes be kind of realistic. We don't ever want to tell students they can't be what they want to be, but if they want to be these big, great dreams, then we need to help them make a path towards them. And if that's something that they're really not wanting to do, then we've discovered that's not a good match for them and we can move to something else. So that's my take on the fluff scale. It's my favorite thing. When we're looking at transition planning, we have some questions here to kind of help guide you in working with your student. The first and biggest important question is, who is the student? Oh, sorry. Where does the student want to go? Where does the student want to learn? What is their general plan? Some students immediately are going to tell you, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. They know, they do know, they just haven't verbalized those things to you yet. They may have an idea, and you're going to have to start with big questions like, what do you want to work in? If they're not sure, you're going to have to narrow those things down. Almost immediately, a student will be able to tell you where they want to live. They may not want to do it in front of mom or dad, but they have an idea. And so that's a really great place to start, kind of having to tease those questions out of them if the students are not so willing to share. And other students are completely willing to share. They want to tell you everything about their plans. And once we're able to kind of get to what is it about this student and what do they want and what do they need to get to their goals, then we can start the real transition planning.
And why is a really good question to ask too. So Belka's kind of gave some examples earlier of, oh, I want to be a professional football player. And we actually work with a lot of people who want to be professional football players. Professional athletes is a common thing. And of course, Belkis and I are both at OU. And so this exact transition planning process is also great for the OU football players because not all of them are going pro. So it's, what do you want to do when you finish college? But that why is really important. So I had a student several years ago when I was teaching who had intellectual and developmental disabilities and was very adamant that they wanted to be a doctor. You know, I want to be a doctor. I want to be a doctor. Nope, want to be a doctor. I'm going to go to med school. And trying to get that why. Why do you want to do this? And so for this student, he wanted to be a doctor because he wanted to help people. And so now we have the what you want to do and the why you want to do it. And it's the help. I want to help. And so for this student, literally, he, last time I'd heard from him, I don't live in that community anymore, but he was working at a hospital preparing medical trays before surgery, but he had a white jacket. So as far as he was concerned, he was a doctor, but he was helping people. And so it's really trying to get that, who are you? What do you want? What are you good at? Why do you want to do this? And let's look for match between all of these things.
Yeah, I think we also see that a lot with students who want to be veterinarians. We have a lot of students who say they want to be veterinarians. And veterinary school is like harder to get into than medical school or any other place. And we also learned that students don't necessarily want to be veterinarians, but they want to work with animals, which is a very different realm. There's a lot of jobs that let you work with animals. There's very few that let you be a veterinarian. So that's something like that. Getting to the why is really important. Okay. So when we're looking at specific transition assessments, we're going to share the ones that are probably the most common in Oklahoma And then the one that we offer at OU, because we're biased and we love it. We're going to start with the OK College Start. This is available to the Oklahoma teachers. Oh, sorry. And I actually really like this site. It took me a little while to figure out how to use it and how to log in and everything. But once we were in, and it's because we're not in school, so we didn't have that exact training. But once you're in the site, you're able to create a whole student profile, and you can give the students assessments to figure out what their interests are. So if you do have that student who says, I don't know, and then you also don't know, this is a really cool place to start working with them. They're also able to explore careers and get into all the nitty gritty about the careers, which is really great. They can start building their resume, which if they're wanting to be college bound is a really cool place to have it like stored, and then they can update and have access to it even when they leave the high school setting. And there's also a lot of college planning and financial aid or information, which for some places, and depending on where we are in Oklahoma, that's not really something that a lot of students have availability to. So having a central system online is a really cool place to do it. This is just a little bit of what the post-secondary planning area, the interest profiler, and the job exploration looks like. And some of them have videos attached to them, which is also really cool, because if you have students who kind of have a general idea but don't really know what the job actually entails, these little short videos kind of help them figure out, just by a 1 to 2 minute clip, like, I actually don't want to be outside, so maybe an agricultural person is not for me, but I like parts of that job, and they can start pulling out what they like. Then we have the ONET Interest Profiler. This is available online completely for free for anybody. My favorite thing about this is that it's color coded. So for students, it's a little bit easier to get through than a typical paper pencil assessment or something that's in like black, white, and gray. And they're also rating based on happy faces or like emojis, which we know they're familiar with. So it kind of helps this process go a lot faster. And so the student will just be rating building kitchen cabinets. That does not make me happy. I am not going to build a kitchen cabinet, or I am, or I would be interested in that, and they would be able to see. Once you get through the interest profiler, they'll be able to select jobs based on how much education they want to pursue for that kind of career area, and then they'll have specific careers to explore, which is really cool. It looks a little bit like this, and it starts ranking them based on their answers. And then from there, they'll be able to see a little bit more about their preferences, but also jobs that match their preferences.
So within these different, the realistic, investigative, artistic job, like Belkis was saying, it will say this might be a job preference that you would like based on the things that you indicated. So.
And then one of my favorite things about the ONET is that it gives you this synopsis of everything about the job that the student is choosing to explore. So a really great goal or activity to do in a classroom or for homework or any kind of time setting that you have for the student is to have them pick 3 jobs in their area, and then look at the sheet that they give you. See if those are skills that you possess or are willing to learn how to gain. And then it's cut off here, but it also gives you information about the pay, availability in your state. That stuff is really important to know, because if there's a job there was one that was like air baggage handler, but there are only 2 major airports in Oklahoma, it means you have to live somewhere near those airports, and it may make a difference in what career they choose to do. So. All right, so here are some examples of post-secondary goals. The easiest way I describe goals is that we have a big, a little, and a baby goal. So our post-secondary goal is our big goal. After high school, I will. And if we're looking at, I believe these are these are employment. I'm sorry. These are employment goals.
Employment.
So after high school, I will obtain employment as a barista. A student specific job goal is to be a barista, then that's a great goal to put in there. I will work in a job in the area of business finance. As we know now, there are a million jobs within business finance, and they don't all have to be accountant, so they could find something in that realm. I will work in a career in social or retail services area. This is a really great place. I like these goals more for younger students like 8th, 9th, 10th grade, because they still have time to explore, and that's great.
And all students, once they have a transition plan, are required to have annual post-secondary goals. And post-secondary means that post-secondary after you finish. So graduating from high school is not a post-secondary goal. And that's something that we often see is, student will graduate from high school. No, that's not post-secondary. And so please keep that in mind. And, kind of as it says to the bottom, think about the Fluff scale. So goals when you're in ninth grade, after high school, I want to go to college, or after high school, I want to get a job. And it's okay for things to be broad. But by the time you're a senior and getting ready to graduate, it should be a lot more specific in terms of what you want to do, because you've had this opportunity to explore and figure out what you want.
A fun fact, the Casey Life Skills is like the #1 used transition assessment in special ed, I think in all the country, is what the last study I saw said. And it's great for a number of reasons. One, it's free. Two, it's very comprehensive. And then as you'll see in a couple slides, it considers a lot of different point or perspectives for students. They could be in many different areas, and there's kind of a test for wherever your student may be. So it's really great. Once you're completed, it's 8 different pages that they have to complete of questions. It's not too long. And you can save and come back, which is one of the best things for students who don't like to take tests for too long. You get these results that kind of tell you where it is that you are doing really well in, or that you say it's a student self-assessment. So where the student says that they like to do or are willing to do or doing well in already, and then they'll give you areas that they need to improve on.
Yeah, Casey Life Skills is also good from the standpoint that it asks about a lot of life skills, and not so much academic, but how much support are you going to need with health? Do you know how to make a doctor's appointment? Do you know how to properly take medication? And some of those extra, more, of course it's called Casey Life Skills, but it's really going to ask about some of those life domains that some of the other job interest inventories and whatnot aren't going to ask about.
You'll also see that, sorry, really quickly, that #7 there says foster care issues. Casey Life Skills was created for students in foster care. And that, I think that's why it's looking at so many life skills specifically. But just because it has that area doesn't mean the rest of it is not or relevant to our students. So don't let that be a reason that you don't use this. Then we have the Landmark College Assessing College Readiness. I'd like to call this our a reality assessment, basically, because we don't have a little picture of it here, but you can literally just Google it. But what it does is, for students who say they want to go to college but are not, but as an educator or as a parent, that they're not maybe considering what college academic life is really like. What, like, the very first question in this assessment is, can you read 200 pages in a week of technical information? Because there are some classes that you're going to take, or you might be taking multiple classes in one semester in college, that will require you to read that much. Some don't, and that's fine. But are you prepared for like the basic parts of college that sometimes happen that can be really hard and stressful? And if you're not, and that assessment determines it, what a great place to start working in high school. Some of the questions are like, do you know how to take notes so that you can study for a test? That's a really big one. Some people don't, and it's really important depending on what major it is you choose.
And I would not get too hung up or fixated on the fact that it does say for parents of college-bound children with learning disabilities or ADHD. Number one, I think this is a great assessment for any student, disability or not disability, regardless of the level of disability, just because it gives you a lot of information to think about. So keep that in mind.
Then we have the TAGG, and we took out all the slides where we love talking about the TAGG, and we kind of just shortened this for you guys because first, we're biased, but also there is a price attached to the TAGG. It's $3 per set, and we do that because we have to. But we do believe that the TAGG is great for students. Right now, it's more designed for students with mild, moderate disabilities. We're almost ready to give to widen the the scope for students with more significant needs. And it's looking at areas of education and employment for students with disabilities. And it takes not just the perspective of the student, but the perspective of their teacher or the educator and their family member. So it kind of encompasses everyone there. One of the best things about it is that once the assessments have been completed, you will get a written profile that can be copy and pasted into the IEP, and then you will get suggestions for your annual transition goals. So that would be your little goal after your big goal. And then that can also be copy and pasted in the IEP. It's IDEA compliant, SMART goal, ABCD, however it is you'd like to write your goals. And and if you don't think that those are necessarily the best goals for your student, you can use those as a baseboard, something to jump off.
So the tag was developed by the Zero Center, and as Velkus was saying, it is $3 per set. That is $3. There's 3 parts to it. There's a parent part, a student part, and a teacher part, and so it's $3 for that set of assessments. Lori Chestnut was on the call earlier. I'm not sure if she is still on the call, but the State Department has bought several thousand credits for teachers in Oklahoma to use it. So if this is something that you're interested in, please reach out to Lori. If you are a parent yourself, reach out to your teachers who can reach out to Lori. But there are lots of TAGG credits that have been purchased for educators in Oklahoma. And also, as Velkus was saying, the original TAGG was developed for students with more mild, moderate disabilities. We are this close to finalizing TAGG A, which is TAGG alternate for students with more significant disabilities. So if that's something you're interested in, please get in touch with us on that as well. But we're this close, so it's kind of exciting when you finally see the end of the road to get there.
All right, so here are some examples of some post-secondary education goals. So after high school goals for students who want to, we're asking the question, where do you want to learn? Now we focus, I think, a little bit more on college so far, but college is not the only option for students. There are, as we know, many different options. There's technical school, there's on-the-job training, there's apprenticeship, technical schools. There's lots of options, and here are some considerations that we have included for them. So a student who wants to attend culinary school, or a student who wants to go to the adult learning courses at the local technical school. We see that a lot in Oklahoma. I think one of the best things about Oklahoma schools are its like pipeline to the CTE schools and courses. That's a lot that a lot of states don't have, and I think it's really cool. And then those who do want to attend a 4-year university, that's a great goal for others too. It just has to be an appropriate goal and one that they really are wanting to go towards.
All right, so we just got the 5-minute warning to kind of wrap up. And so I'm gonna kind of fly through the last little bit here, which is more of FYI information anyway. Please make sure that you reach out to your local VR. VR is an amazing support help for transition. Of course, there's other adult agencies as well. One thing that we also want to quickly go over is that there's 3 areas for transition. There's education, employment, and independent living. Now, independent living, according to IDEA, says as needed. I'm just going to throw out that I have never met someone who does not need assistance with independent living. So I highly, 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 if you're an educator, make sure you address it. If you're a parent or guardian, make sure that it is being addressed in your child's transition plan. And there are some great assessments out there related to independent living as well. Again, KC Life Skills is one of them. And again, examples of post-secondary independent living goals. So the last thing I kind of wanted to get to is there is free transition material out there. If you are an educator in the Oklahoma School District, there are some amazing Pepper modules which have been developed. The Iris Center is also an amazing place for material and training related to transition. Here's a snapshot of the Pepper modules that are available to you for free. All you have to do is log into EdPlan and take these transition modules. The last one is the Zero Center is providing a series of transition trainings, which are free to all educators. And Lori, I don't want to misspeak, but I know that oftentimes parents, adult service providers, and other individuals have joined these webinars. And so I think they're open to anyone within the state, but definitely for sure open to educators. So this is kind of our last slide. The last is just a wrap up with our contact information. But definitely wanted to make sure we had time for questions. Sorry, I know I just flew through those at the end.
Well, I want to thank both of you so much for the tremendous amount of information that you have shared and the great resources. Dr. Williams-Dean, I think if you can turn control over to me, and we can move on to questions and answers.
Okay, so stop screen share, and then I make you the host.
Yes.
When I click on those three buttons, it does not say make you the host. Oh, okay, you're screen sharing.
Am I screen sharing now? Okay,
yeah.
Great. So, all right. So please use the question and answer form section to submit any questions. We did have one question, and I wanted to say that this webinar is being recorded, and so it will be posted on our YouTube channel, which the information will be found later on. Getting a question text to me right now. Okay, it looks like I'm showing my notes. That's not good, is it? Well, you guys are just going to see them, so I don't have time to fix it right now, so forgive me for my notes. We did have some questions that were submitted ahead of time, so we'll start with those. So one of them, you mentioned other resources such as VR, and question is, what can I do if an outside agency such as VR or another service agency was invited to the child's transition meeting but did not attend?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so VR counselors have literally hundreds of people on their caseload. And so as much as they would like to attend all transition plans, they also kind of have a hierarchy in terms of trying to go to senior transition planning, trying to do different things. My first recommendation is definitely reach out to your VR counselor and figure out how they do it. Oftentimes VR counselors might not go to transition plans, but they may be on that campus certain days of the week. And so you can make an appointment with them when they're in that, they're on your high school campus. But yeah, that is a concern just because VR counselors have so many students on their caseloads and cannot be in all places at the same time, but please don't give up. VR counselors love to hear from their families and clients.
From a legal perspective for teachers, if the VR counselor cannot come, just make sure you've documented that they were invited. And then you have to move forward with your job and try to keep those connection lines open, but just make sure you've documented that they were invited.
Great. So we have another question. As an occupational therapist, what is my role compared to that of a teacher or educator to assist the student and family with transition planning?
You know, I am not an OT, so I will say that right now. But as far as I'm concerned, I mean, it's that coordinated effort. And so the occupational therapist, physical therapist, all those related services, a lot of times have this amazing ability because they've seen clients from when they were really little into adulthood. So they can provide information that educators don't know. And they're an absolute critical part of the transition planning process, especially when you get into independent living and moving around the community. Related services provide information that teachers don't know. So absolutely huge part of that process.
I've worked with a lot of OTs in my time, and I mean, they were all wonderful, but it completely what Kendra said, they were filling in gaps that I couldn't address as a teacher myself. There are a lot of mobility and other issues that affect a student's ability to be employed, a student's ability to live independently after high school that I didn't first know how to teach because that wasn't my specialty, but also didn't have time to teach. And that's where the OT came in and really picked up where the rest of the team couldn't at the time. Really great. Yeah.
And related service should be invited to all meetings. So they are an equal part of that educational planning meeting.
So we have another question. Can you define Oklahoma mandate age again? My district will not start until age 16. I've tried to get it started before with no success.
Lori Chestnut is on this call today, and so I want to make sure I'm saying this perfectly. In Oklahoma, it is required by the time a student starts high school. So, or 16, whichever happens earlier. So the second a student sets foot into 9th grade, they should have a transition plan already in place.
Even if you can't formally start before 9th grade or age 16, whichever came first, you can start transition planning informally. It happens really naturally in a lot of settings when we have career days, when we talk about different types of jobs and payments and financial supports. That stuff happens in schools. We know you can make a little bit more directed effort so that your students are getting some of that knowledge and you're making sure. It just doesn't necessarily get documented in the IEP until your school district allows it. So don't think that just because they don't say you can formally put it in the plan that you can't start teaching those skills. You can.
That's a very good point. Very good point. We have about 2 minutes left, so one or two more questions. One of them is, are the number of credits, high school credits, the only thing that must be considered for graduation?
I am not the best expert to answer this question. IEP committees can choose if someone has completed the requirements of their IEP, students can graduate based on IEP completion. But I will totally default to not being the best credit person to answer.
I'm sorry, I haven't taught here, so I couldn't tell you.
We will be, I think I know the answer, but I don't want to speak specifically towards it. So we'll verify that, and we are more than happy to send an email out to those that participated today with the answer for that. Let's see, one other question. I don't see any more submitted in the Q&A, but this is one that was submitted ahead of time. If the transition plan was not done at the appropriate time, can the school still graduate my child?
Yeah.
Technically, yes.
Yeah, technically, yes.
Yes, it should not stop your student from graduating at any point. It just would also mean that they didn't get all the years that they were supposed to have transitioned education. So kind of have to squeeze it into the time they have left.
Yeah, at some point the school was potentially out of compliance, but yeah, it should not affect graduation.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you all again so much for your time today. This was very, very helpful information. I do want to try to advance my slides. Okay, so if you do have additional questions that come up, feel free to funnel those through Sherilyn Walton, and then we'll get those to our wonderful presenters today. We also are excited to have a partnership with Michelle DeBerry with the State Department of Education, and so she's willing to answer any questions as well. You can find her information there. And today is our final webinar of our special education webinar series in the month of October. So all of those webinars will be found on our YouTube channel, which is here. And we just want to thank you all again for being with us. Please reach out to the ARC of Oklahoma with any questions that you have related to special education or anything dealing with individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Thank you again to our speakers, and we appreciate your time, and have a great day.
Thank you. Lisa, do you want us to hang on, or are we?
I just saw, for those that are still on that haven't ended yet, Lori Chestnut sent a message that we can email her directly, lori.chestnut@sde.ok.gov for questions about graduation. All right. Thank you all so much.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
It looks like I still have, for some reason, it looks like I'm the host.